Tēnā koutou te whānau o Auckland Unitarians. Tēnā koutou nā manahiri, no mai, haere mai ki te nei whare karakia a te atua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. We welcome you to this space Auckland Unitarians have been making sacred for 118 years by imagining a better world. I, you, us, them, those people. Wouldn't it be lovely if one could live in a constant state of we? Some of the most commonplace words can be some of the biggest dividers. They. What if there was no they? What if there was only us? If words could be seen as they floated out of our mouths, would we feel no shame as they passed beyond our lips? If we were to string our words on a communal clothesline, would we feel proud as our thoughts flapped in the breeze? So be it. And afterwards, after this time of being us and we, I invite our guests and visitors to join us for morning tea, our sacrament of hospitality. It is our way of thanking you for honoring us by your presence. Please join us. It will not be complete without you. In case you didn't see this online, I want to share this reflection. A reflection 1 week on from the terror attacks in Onoatai. Hala Nasser reflects on growing up Muslim in Aotearoa. I woke up to a surreal realization. It feels familiar, deep in my bones, yet disembodied in the anxious discourse of dismissal from friends, colleagues, and even people from my community. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, we are not exceptional. We are not a utopia far from the world's problems. We are its mere reflection. Our problems are local and situated, but also global and messy. I can't shake the thought, I told you so. Why didn't you believe me? I grew up centered by Tikapa Moana and Islamic bedtime stories. Played netball, goal attack for life, in a miniskirt, and Friday prayers in a hijab with my baba. Parties on Saturday night at an Arabic school on Sunday. When I hear Tui sing or see Piwa Kawaka dancing, my heart literally leaps. Do you see me? When I was 8, drawing my self-portrait, a Pakeha girl in my class grabbed the beige crayon out of my hand, telling me to use the dark brown crayon instead. I refused to go to school that week. I never told my mama why. When I was 11, I watched a terrorist attack unfold on a television in class. That day, my predominantly Pakeha classmates connected me to the terrorists, and for weeks asked me why my mother wore a scarf on her head. I would hide in the library at lunchtimes. I never told my mama. When I was 19, a boy I liked told me it wouldn't work because I was a Muslim and my family were Muslim. His mother wouldn't approve. I didn't bother to tell him neither would mine. When I was 20, a university lecturer told my third year political science class week's TED's class was on a Muslim terrorism. Week 10's class was on Muslim terrorism. I asked him about right-wing terrorism. He told me to sit down and shut up. I looked around at my predominantly Pākehā peers. No one said anything. I left. When I was 25, my mama, who wears a hijab, was assaulted in Milford Mall, our local, for over 25 years, and told to get out of New Zealand. The management staff did nothing, despite our complaints. When I was 26, neo-Nazis delivered boxes of pig heads at the Al-Noor Mosque in Christchurch, while saluting Hitler and calling for Muslims in Aotearoa to be culled. I felt uneasy visiting Christchurch for work. I didn't feel I could tell my boss or colleagues. When I was 27, white supremacists were given platforms to visit and speak to sold-out venues in Australia and Aotearoa. When Muslims objected, we were told that we were exaggerating, that we were the enemies of freedom. In the end, their freedom of speech was prioritized over our lives. I'm 28 now, and on that Friday night, my mother said to me, "I can't have 80 children's lives on my conscience, Yahala." She decided to cancel Sunday school that weekend. She has volunteered managing and teaching Arabic and Islam to children in the Muslim community of the North Shore for almost 20 years with other women in our community, 10 years of which my sister and I attended. The police have asked that the Sunday school stay closed until further notice. My sister told me not to worry. I brought her cats inside in case they wanted to target Muslim cats too. We laughed, and then we cried. With humility and courage, born of our history, we are called as Unitarians to build the beloved community, where all souls are welcome as blessings, and the human family lives whole and reconciled. With this vision in our hearts and minds, we light our chalice. When I was about 6, that would have been about 1955, something happened that had a profound effect on me. We were visiting for the summer with my grandparents. One evening at the dinner table, my grandfather, born in 1895, went into a tirade about anyone who was not a white, straight person, using every reprehensible but common smear to describe each. Since I had not learned what that hate language even meant yet, I wasn't shocked. What shocked me was the fury my mother, born in 1925, directed at her father. She made it perfectly clear he was never to use such language in front of her children again. I doubt it changed his 19th century views, but it left an indelible mark on me. At some primal level, I understood the predominantly white middle-class world I was safely cocooned within was not extended to everyone. That even people I loved spoke cruelly about people I had not even had the chance to meet yet, or even knew yet existed. Later, I would learn in horror how unsafe it could be for people who were targeted by that language. It was 1963. I lived in a predominantly white region of America. I think I had only met one other black child when the 16th Street Baptist Church was bombed in Birmingham, Alabama, killing 4 black children and injuring 22 others. It left another indelible mark. It was an act of white supremacist terror by 4 Ku Klux Klansmen. It would take 15 years before any prosecutions were initiated, and another 15 years before the 3 still alive began serving life sentences in prison. The tepid response to the crime only accentuated the unsafe environment black people lived in. On a human level, I didn't like it, but I could neither relate to or understand what it might have felt to grow up black in America. There were no black people on TV, except as comedic foils, or if they could sing well. People still spoke of a great white hope in boxing. There were no black people, or white women for that matter, in elected office to speak of. News reports of crime focused on black crime. In 1963 Birmingham, there were no black police or firefighters. But that was not uncommon throughout the US I grew up in. It was normal. For the most part, I don't think I would have given it a second thought, if not for the film In the Heat of the Night. It was now 1967, and it left another indelible mark. Just as that same year, Guess Who Is Coming to Dinner would. Seeing an interracial couple walking hand in hand in the street was still highly notable, for only in that year did the Supreme Court declare all laws prohibiting interracial marriage and sex unconstitutional. While my grandfather would have had some pretty unsavory things to say about that, a young idealistic naif off to university found it a sign of hope that the world was becoming a better place. While no longer naive and a grandfather myself, my idealism hasn't grown cynical. I still long for the world that is becoming a better place. I still believe it is possible. And much of my hope now resides in our youth. But their efforts to make it better are in a very different world thanks to the internet and social media. It is a world that believes there are alternative facts to support my grandfather's 19th century bigotry. It is hard to imagine that there are people who wholeheartedly believe vaccines are the cause of autism, as argued by one charlatan, thoroughly discounted by reputable scientific studies. And now measles, once vanquished, is breaking out in parts of this and other countries. It is hard to imagine that people still believe that climate change is a hoax in spite of 99% of the scientific community and 100% of our weather patterns and rising sea levels say different. What accounts for this? It needs to be understood if New Zealand is to become the social laboratory our Prime Minister calls us to become, to find a cure for racial hatred. In such an undertaking, the book The Cynic and the Fool might be helpful. It is by Tad DeLay, a scholar who writes at the intersection of psychoanalysis, philosophy, and theology. DeLay's work says that if we can't agree on the facts, how we proceed will sometimes depend on what is going on underneath our disagreement. To use DeLay's categories, we need to ask, are the facts in dispute because we are engaged with a misinformed but honest fool, or are we dealing with a nihilistic cynic who does not care about the truth and seeks only to amass power at any cost? We have all watched enough political interviews or Trump rallies to have wondered whether a given politician is so foolish as to actually believe what he just said, or instead is just cynically towing a party line he knows is false. Along these lines, the late conservative political commentator, William F. Buckley, was famous for saying, "I will not insult your intelligence by treating you as if you are as stupid as you pretend to be." My naive self once believed we lived in a world in which everyone was acting above board. Unfortunately, experience taught me not every person disagreed with me was acting in good faith. That is, with honesty and sincerity of intention. So when I find myself encountering Orwellian doublespeak about alternative facts, I remind myself periodically of sci-fi writer Philip K. Dick's line, "Reality is what doesn't go away even when you stop believing in it." There is no such thing as an alternative fact. A fact is something that is indisputably the case. And there may be consequences for one or more parties as reality catches up with the propaganda, either in the short or long term. But in the meantime, arguing with somebody operating in bad faith can be exhausting at best and deeply harmful at worst. I'm also reminded of a line that I find most haunting from George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984. "The heresy of heresies was common sense. The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." Anytime the powers that be begin to convince significant numbers of people to disbelieve facts, we are in treacherous times. And whenever people in power are promoting alternative facts, concerned citizens should leverage political, ethical, technological, and other forms of power to replace them with leaders more likely to act in good faith and in accordance with more reputable information. That is a rare commodity, and why Jacinda's honesty and sincerity of intention makes her the preferred leader around the world. What about the other side of DeLay's formulation? Many who are not cynical nihilists, but merely misinformed but honest fools. David Dunning and Justin Kruger are two research psychologists at Cornell University, known for researching the relationship between knowledge and confidence. Their most famous finding is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Not much ego there, I guess. which shows that the less you actually know, the more confident you are about what you think you know. To quote Dunning and Kruger, underinformed people not only reach erroneous conclusions and make unfortunate choices, but their incompetence robs them of the ability to realize it. Of course, experts get it wrong sometimes too, but they are good faith actors. But if they are good faith actors, they have also spent a lot of time studying common errors and pitfalls in their field. And here's a related corollary to the Dunning-Kruger effect, called the above average effect. In almost every area, everyone thinks they're well above average. Unfortunately, 50% of us are wrong. The truth is that most of us don't like to be wrong and love to be right. And there is good reason why. Our brains get a dopamine rush when we find confirming data similar to the one we get if we eat chocolate, have sex, or fall in love. So evolution has given us a strong incentive to maintain our current view because it feels more pleasurable to do so. Irrespective of whether it is right or wrong, psychologists call a related effect confirmation bias the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. Thanks to our amygdala back here, our fight or flight reaction is triggered when we encounter facts with which we currently disagree. When we hear a disagreeable idea, the body's chemical reaction is the same as if someone had pulled a knife on us in a dark alley. And when the amygdala is activated, brain scans also show a darkening of activity in the rational prefrontal cortex portion of our brain. These factors contribute to the all too human tendency to persist in believing delusions instead of painfully facing the facts. This problem is inflated by social media. We defriend on our Facebook account those we don't agree with, who don't agree with us, and follow on Twitter those who do. It's like a dopamine crack house available to us 24/7 in our pockets. In our social laboratory, how are we to confront the misinformed fools confident in their alternative facts? He suggests engaging in conversations. It is probably not helpful to begin by calling them misinformed fools. He recommends motivational interviewing. This encompasses digging down to discover why they hold fast to their alternative facts. After prioritizing deep listening, you may reach a point where you could ask if they understand how much harm their convictions do to themselves and others. I would add to DeLay's approach that in our lab we hold others accountable for their words and acts that threaten society or others, no matter how much their alternative facts justify them in their own mind. When a bus driver recently slammed the door in the face of a schoolgirl wearing a hijab coming home from a vigil, her two friends were justifiably outraged. They went to the bus company and made a complaint. CC Video verified their complaint. If we want to make the world a better place, we can't do so without maintaining UU principles, especially the first principle of the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Even when we can't reach agreement on the facts. One of the most helpful books is Cultivating Empathy, The Worth and Dignity of Every Person Without Exception, by Unitarian minister Nate Walker. Walker has written, I once believed that it was powerful to condemn wrongdoers. I believed it was right to tear down another's unexamined assumptions and to vaporize those whose presence was not worthy of my attention. I believed that others were the cause of my aggression. Others were to blame for my feelings of despair, disappointment, and righteous indignation. I was doing justice, all while being a jerk. For Nate, one of the most powerful tools for cultivating empathy is what he called the moral imagination. The ability to anticipate or project oneself into the middle of a moral dilemma or conflict and understand all the points of view. Nate writes that it is possible for me to understand another person's views without necessarily agreeing with them or silencing my own voice. Understanding is a prerequisite for empathy. When we observe oppression, let us develop strategies that free not only the oppressed, but also the oppressor. Do not let their unjust actions inspire us to cruelty, or else we will soon become what we set out against. Namaste. I think perhaps a brief discussion of your thoughts on how we become a social lab to cure the virus of racism might be in order. We'll send them on to Jacinda.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed your talk. And I want to remember what you said about speaking to someone that you disagree with. I recently I've mentioned this before, I went to my sister's church for a celebration birthday and talked to their minister, who I really delved and asked questions about homosexuality and gay people, LGBT, and yes, we welcome them, yes, this, yes, but when I delved, I found that no, he didn't agree with it, and I wished I'd had that phrase, do you realise that what damage your beliefs are causing? And I suddenly thought, I had nothing, I couldn't think of something without attacking him, so thank you.
Yes, thank you. The bit that I could identify most clearly with is grasping onto something that reinforces what I believe, and that one definitely gets a buzz from that. Looking at ways in which to have discussions in a way as you described, I think it would be wonderful if we could have some sort of adult education around all of this, because personally I think some of these skills I could really use. and I think as a group of people who firmly support these principles, I think we need to learn techniques as to how to apply them in a way that does not attack other people.
In my circle, we've been struggling with something in the last week, and that is the talk on the media and in our community at the moment about banishing Islamophobia, and the fact that a prevalent principle in Islam is not favourable to LGBT. And I'd be really interested in everyone's thoughts on And I've been grappling with it and sort of trying to draw on these principles and saying, well, you can respect a person and their humanity without agreeing with the principles. But as a society and as a nation, I'd be really interested in people's thoughts on how we reconcile those two. Particularly, I mean, I wish we had Jacinda here. How's she doing it, right? And what leadership can she give us about that in terms of what we embrace as a country? Can we embrace Islam but not that part of it?
A couple years ago, I thought of the idea of having diversity dinners where you invite people from different faiths to sit around the table and have dinner and talk about these things in an intimate way. And I thought we could, as a practical thing, we could invite the local mosque, which is down the street, to say, hey, let's have a little dinner together and get to know each other, because I think familiarity with people on a personal level is the answer. When you know somebody is a friend and you've had dinner with them, you can't fear them and you can't hate them.
I don't know, I probably have about 24 different thoughts coming around with all of this. And along with what you said, that there's that internal conflict between, what someone else does with their lives that, well, I should just mind my own business. It's not my business how they live their lives. But then when we talk about Islamophobia or anti-gay sentiment, well, then that kind of is my business. And I always personally struggle with that, and I tend just not to speak up. And then some other things that you were talking about, Clay, those biases that we grow up with and that are reinforced by the media. And, in the U.S. media, black-on-black crime is, oh, well, okay, fine, whatever. And black-on-white crime is horrible, and white-on-black crime is automatically assumed justified. And, I mean, it's still prevalent in the media in the U.S. And then some of the biases that we don't even realize we have. And when reporting, and he said the words, well, there weren't any scruffy kids there. And immediately I'm like, well, what did you mean by that? And how did each of us take that? Because what did, saying scruffy kids, well, what did that mean? What was that implying? And that's just all built in. We just grew with these things and have to address them. And I recently read the book, White Fragility, where she's talking about how whites, and of course it's a U.S. book, but talking about how whites have to address the fact that they grew up racist without knowing it. And that, blacks are not overreacting when they take things badly because they've been dealing with this their whole lives.
Thank you, Clay. This is slightly maybe left field for some people, but I have a lot of regular contact with both Asian students and the Asian community, and I am part of an Asian family. People who look Asian in New Zealand, who walk around in groups, experience daily, sometimes frequent, discrimination comments, nasty comments, go back to your own country, slit eyes, this kind of comment. And this seems to be inbuilt to groups of young males walking around. They never do it on their own. They have to be in a group to feel the courage to make these remarks. But my Asian relatives and my Asian students live with this. This exists in New Zealand and it hasn't gone away. And I just have concerns about, I'm very concerned about Muslims and discrimination, but I'm also concerned that there's other discrimination going on in this country that we tend to overlook or we don't know about.
Thanks, Clay. My comment is really based around part of the thing that the issue you were talking about reaffirming your views. And I've heard it described as living in an echo chamber. My son's talked about it, living in a silo. And one way, through work we did with our circle group, that I've looked at it, that I'm now a lot more conscious of what I click when I'm looking at news on my iPhone or on the computer, whether because again, so that's the only way I'm dealing with it, is internally just trying to realise that every time I click on something just the same or similar is going to pop up.
What you were saying about if there are things about a religion, another person's culture that you don't like, I think, well, there's several things, but one is Christianity in some of its forms also teaches those things, and it's really dangerous for those of us whose culture is essentially Christian, even if we're not Christian any longer, to feel superior culturally in that way. But the other thing I think is that there will be queer Muslim people, and I think the more open we are to another culture, and the more listening, and the more, what did you say, moral imagination, putting ourselves in another person's situation, the more open society will be, and then Muslim gay people will find gay people outside of Islam and be able to actually, it's their business actually inside their religion, what the attitudes and what the teachings are, not really ours.
I come from a mixed family now. We have Samoan, Maori, Taiwanese, and things like Irish, things like that, you know. What I've always felt was that skin color is a really stupid thing to make any sort of decision on. And I read in a book on forensics that the color in our skin is only on the dermis, the very thin top layer. And they found when people are murdered and left in water, that dermis just sloughs off. It just goes away and floats away. It just makes me realize that it is silly to make decisions on skin color. And when I hear it now, I'm really shocked. Actually, recently I was at a rationalist meeting of all places, and one man said, he was referring to talking to some Indians, and he said, a touch of the tar brush, you know. And I felt as if someone had hit me. It was just shocking, and I'm still shocked. How can people do that? Thank you.
Well, I'll give you a question for morning tea. Even amongst us as Unitarians who share a lot of common values and that sort of thing, we don't all share the same beliefs in that bag. Okay? We've come to them by different ways. And some people will express a belief from their bag. They don't trouble us. But others do share a belief we don't agree with. Now, why do we get really upset about that one? What's going on within us that we choose certain beliefs to react so strongly to and not to others? I would argue that part of the answer is where our own awareness has grown, or it touches us pretty personally, or whatever. But why do we choose that one to be the line in the sand, that we're going to no longer deal with that person anymore? So, you know, as we work towards trying to become a model for the rest of the world, how do we deal with our own outrage? What do we forgive or confront, or how do we confront it in such a way that we aren't perpetrating it in under another name? My closing words. And now, since the struggle deepens, since evil abides, and good does not yet prosper, let us gather what strength we have, what confidence and valor is ours, that our small victories may end in triumph, and the world awaited to be a world attained.